back at him, back in the saddle.
Yes, sir.
Got Eddie over here.
It's a good one. This is one I've always wanted to do. We always hear about the addict side of things, but today we get to talk to a parent of a child that they lost.
Yeah.
We've
had a lot of different experiences.
Yeah, which is a great side to hear, because we don't hear that. You always hear, if you're a meeting goer and all that, you always hear the story of somebody who's been through the addiction part of it, but we never hear from the family and the effects that it has on the family. So I'm really excited about this one. Definitely. For sure. So thank you. I know it's a tough thing, losing a child. So it's definitely much appreciated that you come out and talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Very courageous.
So David, will you, start by introducing yourself? Let us know who you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we kind of dive in too far.
Yeah, okay. So I'm David, father of 3 boys, and I just turned 60 recently, so that's how old I am.
You look good, brother.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm the oldest of 7 kids, 5 brothers and a sister. My parents were school teachers. And I will say, I think Andy, so my son Andy was the oldest grandchild of my parents. And there's probably close to 20 grandkids. So
wow,
we were fruitful and multiplied. And the web name goes lots of places. So, but nobody in my family had really what we went through. So our journey has been difficult because nobody in my family went through this. And so even at the funeral, all my brothers and sisters were there. I think...
no history of drug abuse in your family?
No. I mean, I had... My grandfather was a coal miner, and, I can remember him coming to our house, and he used to smoke Prince Albert in a can. He'd roll the cigarettes, and he'd have a thing of whiskey tucked under the couch, and we'd listen to Tiger ball games on the radio. But no, my dad, was a Christian, and we just no alcohol, no drugs in the family. And even today, none of my brothers and sisters we don't live that kind of lifestyle. So
that's interesting. That's not like the common thread, like so many people that we hear about, that it's permeates in one way or another. Like sometimes it's like this underlying thing amongst family members, but goes unspoken, which seems to be for people that I know, very common in larger families, where there is somebody who's dealt with substance use, and then it is an issue, but it's not talked about. It's kind of brushed under the rug, but it sounds like that's just not something that you guys as a family have had to deal with.
No, it's the one thing, that...
Well, from the, we talked a little bit before the show, and we had one of your other sons on the last show. It doesn't sound like it was, he was out trying to get high. It was doctor-induced through pain meds from my understanding of the conversations that we've had.
Yeah, I think I would say Andy was a typical kid. I think he experimented with weed or maybe a little alcohol. I can remember just very rarely, I think one night I got up in the middle of the night. He might have been 9th grade, and he was up. And I remember thinking, you're drunk. And I asked him about it later, and he's like, oh, yeah, I went and saw one of my buddies and had a couple beers or something. And I don't know if that was true, but I just don't have many memories at all of him doing recreational drugs at all, and I think that's true.
So what was your approach to that when in that one instance? What was your approach to more or less calling him out for being drunk? When you talked about it later, how did he react to you coming to him about it? And well, how did you...
So I have 3 boys, and they were all very, very different. Andy was not the kind of personality that responded positively to a strong, taking away a privilege. If if Andy was going to lose a privilege to do something and he wanted to do it, he would gladly pay whatever the privilege he lost, whether it's grounding, not being able to drive, no television, he would do it. So to answer your question, I really didn't make a big deal out of it, and I felt like that was okay because he never it was not a big thing. It was like once or twice, you know, if he would have started you know, doing it a lot, I probably would have had to do something different.
Sure.
So
I mean, it's hard to say, like, there's hindsight and, like, what's what, but, like, I would agree that would be, like, the bet.
yeah.
It didn't seem problematic.
Well, not just that, but, like, when I don't know, I'm not a parent, but, like, I was a child of parents, and, like, I had friends, and I saw, like, the way different parents approach different things, and, like, when it's something that, like, becomes an issue where a child doesn't feel like they can talk about it or, like, has to hide it, like, things have a tendency to become more problematic because of that fact. Like, it's made more of a big deal.
Definitely.
Made more of a big deal out of.
That was kind of that's my family situation. Yeah, there's no way, you know, not as a child, or as a teen, I should say, you know, if I got caught drinking a beer, my dad would lose it, you know.
Right.
So everything I did had to be hidden until I stopped caring and just like whatever. And I was a little more open about it. But yeah, I didn't come from that kind of family where
you could, like, talk about
it.
Like, yeah. It's a weird line to toe because, like, what's, you know, enabling or encouraging, and what's, you know, being like an open parent, and
right.
you know, being able to, like, have your kids come to you about things.
Yeah.
But regardless, so, like, you didn't really see that as being, like, a big issue,
No.
at least early on.
No.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was.
Yeah. Okay. So when did you see it start to become an issue? If you did.
Well, so you gotta have to look at his situation. So Andy was very intelligent. He could have easily gone to college, but he chose to go into the Army, and he went in right after he graduated high school, within a few months, and went to basic training at Fort Leonard Wood in I think Missouri or Illinois, and he was in the early phases, so I think it's a year maybe, or I don't know how long the training was, but apparently he contracted mono while he was in the intense physical part of it, and the people in charge of him didn't recognize that he was really sick. Right. They accused him of, you know, being lazy, faking it, blah blah blah. I mean,
they were
trying to make us
about it. Yeah.
I don't think they wanted to hurt him, but they went too far. And then when they found out that he truly was sick, he had lost a tremendous amount of weight. He was in the Army hospital for a while, and then Kim and I were down in Florida on vacation, and we got a phone call, and it was him, and he said they're sending me home, and I'm going to be at the Atlanta airport in, 8 hours. So we threw our stuff in the car. We drove right to the airport. We were living in Atlanta at the time, and he was really sick. He was very dehydrated. When we got him home, our family doctor admitted him to our local hospital. He was in there for almost a week, getting fluids. He had spleen damage. I mean, it's not what you think of when you hear somebody had mono.
No, I remember it being the kissing disease or kissing, remember?
My sister was down for a couple months, and my mom did too, like seriously ill from mono, and like my sister had like some prolonged issues from it that went on for a while. Like you hear the kissing disease and you get sick, but like there are cases that I've known of that like it can be pretty serious.
Well, that was Andy, and so he I was thinking that they would just discharge him then, but no, he had to go back after 30 days, so he went back, but apparently physically he was no longer able to continue the training. So it was the Army way. I think it was wrong, but they put him in this this unit that was comprised of people that were getting out. There were criminals, all these people. They lived together in this barracks, and I remember him telling me that there were guys in there that wanted to fight him, and he knew that if he fought, that he would not get an honorable discharge, and so he was in a tough group.
Right.
It's where he had to go back and live.
Sounded like they sent him to prison.
I was about
almost.
to say,
yeah. It was really awful. And he's 18 years old, right? And his dream of being an MP in the Army is just gone.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And he'd wanted to do this for a long time. And then what they would do is they would, and I don't want to bash the military bad, but this was our experience.
Mm-hmm.
Every day he would have to get up and he would have to go and sit on the sidelines of the drill, grounds where his unit was working out and training, and you'd have to sit there on the side and watch him.
Right.
Couldn't participate. And so he had to deal with that humiliation.
Yeah.
So finally he was in for a full year and he came home. So he was on, medical discharge. He's still having pain. He's still going to VA doctors. And, this was in, 2011, 2012, in what I think was maybe the height of the opioids are good. They're not bad. We can just give you as much as it takes for you to feel good because you're never going to heal if you're in pain, blah, blah, blah. So
it's when doctors would just throw pills at you like they were candy.
I remember he'd get them in the mail.
Yeah.
He'd get Oxycontin in the mail.
VA for sure,
He'd get Darvocet and whatever else these things were. And he's 18 years old. He weighs 160 pounds, and he's just doing this. So he, that gradually progressed to where, okay, it's time for you to get off of this. They did do some surgery because he had scar tissue on his spleen, I think. So he had physical things, but that's kind of what got him into that. And he's also dealing with, I think, mentally, I'm not a soldier. This was my dream. What am I going to do?
Did he ever talk to you about that? Did that really hit him hard? The fact that he couldn't do that?
Well, I think it did. I didn't know it at the time. It was several years later when we figured it out.
Seems like one of those things, like, I don't know, like contradictory. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but like where you're already feeling as if like your identity has been taken away, and a lot of the, like, it's not the right word, but like the masculinity of like being a part of the military and like having that, like I'm a serviceman, and then like talking about
losing that pride,
having
maybe
that, sure,
losing that
like,
pride of being a soldier,
and then talking about losing your pride seems like even more difficult, like the difficulty in the losing the pride, and then admitting that and talking about that is like difficult in the same reason and in the same way. I could imagine that would be like hard to either recognize or like divulge, just like. And
then, I know he kept in touch with some of his buddies, when they deployed to Germany, but then the rest of his life, I think he would, he still was a veteran, but his experience wasn't one of going to Afghanistan. It was one of, man, I got sick in basic training and medically I couldn't do it anymore. So, he didn't have the medals and the other.
He was a veteran, but didn't feel like a veteran.
Yeah, he didn't have the resume of serving like we would think of.
Right.
So I think that also just kind of weighed on him. And for me as a dad, I thought, because I've been through career changes and things like that, and I've always felt like you get knocked down, you just get back up and go a different direction. So we always really tried to help him. Okay, well, let's go to college and let's try this or let's try that. And, I think that he never escaped his military experience to really get into something else. Plus he had the opioids and other things that were kind of just, always seemed to me like just kind of slowed him down. It's like
that old ball
walking
and
underwater.
chain,
It just, he just couldn't get rid of that to be successful in college.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So where did it go after he came home? Like, what did that look like?
He lived with us. His brothers were gone, so it was just Kim, my wife, and Andy.
Which I'm sure was difficult for him being the oldest too. Like, there had to have been some things just wrapped up in that. Like, my little brothers are off.
Yeah.
Doing like.
Yeah, one's serving in the Marines and another one's in medical school. So,
right.
And Andy was probably smarter than both of them, but he never applied himself or he had, too many barriers to be successful like them. So I know that was a big burden for him, was just, I don't fit in with my family, and they're successful. All that wrapped into that. So
it was for me, and I'm the youngest sibling, like by a good bit. Mm-hmm. But like my sister's an OBGYN, my brother's like a United States diplomat. Like, I was living at home with my parents and had like a severe opiate use disorder, and like was going nowhere, and like that was a really, recognizing that, and like I would often like suppress that idea, but I know like that really bothered me in a lot of ways.
You're the first person I've met that's expressed probably what my son is also dealing with, even though, he's young, you were young, you can't really understand all of the baggage that you're carrying around in your family dynamics, because, Andy had a very similar experience to yours.
Yeah.
So you could relate.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, talking to your son, Alex, like, sounds like there's a lot of things that I could relate to him with. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And then we, so I lived in Jonesboro, Arkansas, was working for a hospital there, and then they moved us to Mississippi. Andy followed us there. And then we moved to Greenville, South Carolina. So we moved every 2 to 3 years for a job, and Andy just kind of came with us. Mm-hmm. I think it was, 10 to 15. After about 5 years of living like this, is when it got really bad, and that was like in 16. So I don't know at what point fentanyl started getting mixed in with heroin, because he was doing heroin and pills and things. But that's when we really got into overdose. I mean, I did CPR on him. Kim did several times. We'd find him unresponsive, and that's tough, really tough.
Of course.
Sure.
But I heard you say earlier, you described the experience, and if you overdose, you wake up, and
it's just like falling asleep.
You don't believe it at all.
No.
And I remember that so many times with Andy, and I'd be so just overwhelmed. Number one, that he's finally started breathing after you're beating on him, and he's looking at you like, what?
Right.
And the person doing the CPR and the person receiving it, you couldn't be too further apart emotionally when you finally look each other in the eye.
Right.
And
that's a good way to put it.
It's you're just so hyped up on adrenaline, and you're so happy, but then you're mad, and he's just, wow, and I know he feels bad. So we did that, at least 4 or 5 times.
Wow. Did you guys like start to keep naloxone around? Or
we did, we did, and learned how to use it. And I don't know. I think maybe some of it disappeared. So sometimes we wonder, was he fine? Because we'd hide it, and and then maybe then it wasn't there, so we'd try to hide it in a different spot.
Yeah.
Maybe he was keeping it with him.
It could be.
Mm-hmm. I used to keep some in my car.
Yeah, same. Well, still do, but for different reasons. Yeah,
it could be.
Yeah.
Could be. Our, in our house, our bedroom walls adjoin each other, so, we could hear him, and we'd listen. We'd go up against the wall and listen to him breathe, and sometimes we'd hear him gasp, or we'd go in there. The door in our house and I'm not going to fix it. I kicked it in one night because he was gasping and he was in there. And
the snore?
No, he was on the floor. I mean, he was
Just gasping,
you know,
yeah.
and then we'd hear him fall, just crash.
Oh, man.
And we'd go busting in there and here there's a needle. So, we say we have PTSD because we lived like that for several years.
I'm sure.
And that's a constant thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
when like every overdose I've reversed, like that takes a while to like process. Like, I've felt that, and it's feels routine in the moment because like I've been there a lot now.
Yeah.
But afterwards, like it is a lot to process, and that's like a stranger or like somebody like I've worked with, not my child. But then like not only that, but living like every day and in fear of that, and then also like being up at night, like literally listening for. I mean, I can't imagine like
many
that's
nights. Yeah,
that's a day-to-day thing. I mean, that's not like an acute traumatic event. That's a long ongoing.
And then, there was funny things that would happen too because we'd listen and he'd go, Dad, Mom, I can hear you. I'm okay.
Right.
So,
Right.
it was, I don't know that a lot of people would have a lifestyle where, your son would live with you and you go through this as parents and your son. I mean, he didn't always live with us. I think probably he lived as long as he did and took as many chances because he was there. I mean, there was food there, and we took care of him, and so that's maybe a little bit different experience than a lot of parents would be, and we're thankful for that he didn't leave and go to another state and then this happened and kind of thing. So we were able to be with him and have a lot of great years with him, even while he was going through this.
That's fortunate because a lot of parents don't. Did you guys go to like Al-Anon or anything like that?
I mean, a couple sessions. A little bit about how we got through it. So I'm a Christian, and was a regular church attendee for a long time. But then when this happened, and we're Andy's with us, church. Is a social thing, so people want to know about you.
Yeah.
And they're not,
as open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do you do? And oh, that's cool. Do you have a family? Yep. Tell them about your family. Oh, you have a son with a problem. Oh, well,
right.
getting late. We need to get
Very
going.
judgmental.
And so we gradually quit that. So we didn't have that social part of our life. And at work, you don't talk about that. Even though I'm not doing anything, you pretty much take your personal life and you really wall it off as a family from your friends and neighbors.
Sure.
And I know when Andy passed away in January, there were people in our neighborhood that we'd known for 5 or 6 years that really had no idea at all. And some of them came to his funeral. But you just really, as a family, you just kind of pull the shades down, and my wife and I said we're just robots. We'd get up in the morning, we'd go to work because we had to go to work, and that was our life, and it was a long years of living like that.
Yeah. I ask if you guys had gone to Al-Anon because a lot of people's experiences in Al-Anon, I'm sure there's some positive experiences.
Now, is Al-Anon, what's the one that's for the non...
That's Al-Anon.
Al-Anon.
So that's for the families of
significant
people.
others.
We did
Yeah.
a couple sessions. For us, it was painful to do and never stuck with it a lot. It just, I don't know.
Personally, I'm glad you didn't. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, just based on like what you've told me about like the way that you guys approached the situation and what you were able to get out of it while he was, you know, alive. A lot of people's experiences in Al-Anon come down to like you draw firm boundaries and you force a bottom, and like literally you force their bottom, like
tough love, kind of
quote unquote tough love. You kick them out, you make them desperate,
Yes.
which especially in today's day and age, like so many parents have like listened to that, and then their children they die, because this isn't 40 years ago when it was like problematic drinking and like people had issues, but like it wasn't a risk of immediate death. You know, this is like what we're dealing with now, like healthy boundaries, and like that's an individual kind of thing to figure out and should be individualized, but I personally don't believe in that approach.
And then the guilt that the family feels after that person
100%.
dies, it's like, oh, we put them out on the street.
100%.
It was supposed to bring them back to us, but then they go out on the street. They're not going to stop if they don't want to stop, no matter if you kick them out, keep them in, whatever. Yeah. And then, you know, that family has to deal with the fact that they killed their son or daughter or whatever, you know, because that's how they feel.
It's funny you said that, because I thought that. And because the first sessions we did, that's not how we chose to take care of Andy. Mm-hmm. And we weren't, for some reason, you know, ever since, even when he was young, the tough love thing is not what worked on him, and it's not what we did when we were going through all these hard times. And I know there were people, I guess maybe family and friends, that might have known what we were doing that disagreed. Close family. I mean, if he's 29 years old and he's living in your house and he's stolen your television again, man, you know, kick him out.
Right.
What are you doing? You know, be a man. And we never did that. You know, we always took him back. I'd go buy a new TV, or, you know, whatever he did to pawn stuff. We didn't use that tough love. So maybe that's when we did go to a few of those sessions. It wasn't what we were we weren't really looking for anything, but we didn't get out of it enough to stay doing it.
Right. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that till now.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you did the best that you could. I mean, that's
I think they all mission, do. You know? I think like even when people are like encouraged to draw that hard boundary and force the bottom, it's also because they think, based on like what they've been told, like by people who have gone through it, that that's what they need to do. Like I think at the end of the day, like everybody tries to do what they think is best, but it doesn't always like work out. And I think, you know, it's becoming more common for parents to take like a more compassionate approach and kind of go about it the way you guys did. But I'd still say like it's not that common. We did have somebody on an episode, one of the earlier episodes, who's his mom like works in mental health and stuff, and she was always very compassionate and accepting. Like she obviously wanted him to like make changes, but you know, I can remember times that she drove him to like meet me when I was like personally doing like underground syringe exchange, and like I've never seen like a parent drive their kid to get clean syringes, but she did, and she was looking out for her child in the way that she thought was best. And, you know, fortunately it worked out. But you know, even if she didn't, I think she would have had, even if it didn't work out, I think she would have had solace in the fact that she did, you know, everything she could to like show love to her child and continue to, you know, love them without strings or firm boundaries like that.
Yeah, my parents were kind of that way. Like I lived at home. You know, I drove my dad nuts. My mom was more like the loving mom. No matter what I did, she's always showed me love, right? My dad and he was the one I tortured the most. But when it came time for me to be ready for help, he's the one who was there, you know? And some people might say, or would have said, he was enabling me, you know? You know, really, he just wanted me to shut the hell up, give me the money, so I'd leave him alone, you know, after fighting with him for 2 hours, try to get that money out of him, things like that. But when the time came and I had my last overdose, you know, he asked me, are you ready for help yet? And yeah, let's go. And he put up the money, you know, $30,000 to put me into treatment. So,
which is insane.
Yeah. Well, I mean, without him, I wouldn't have gone to treatment. I couldn't afford that myself. No way. I don't have insurance.
No, I don't mean it's insane that he put it up. I just mean that it's insane that
the amount of money. Yeah, I know what you meant. But you know, that's the love of a parent, I think, you know.
For sure. So Judy, who's on the ones and twos over there pressing buttons, she asked you earlier before we got rolling, if you knew, like, how aware were you? I mean, obviously, if you guys were in a situation like where you were listening to make sure he was okay, were you always aware, like, from the time that it, you know, really started getting bad? Like, did you have kind of perceptions that things were maybe working out at some points, or like, was he able to maintain and at times where he wasn't like overdosing or nodding out in his chair, or, you know?
Yeah, there was months, even, you know, maybe up to a year at times where he was not using, maybe taking some, you know, prescription pills, that because he was always going to the doctor, where he would, you know, be going to college class. He had, I think when he died, he had the equivalent of a junior in college. So he had, you know, taken a lot of college classes in different things at different schools. So it wasn't like he was always, you know, unconscious in his room. But and then he would, you know, and then you could tell kind of when he started back, and he would, you know, he'd sleep all day, and then in the middle of the night you hear him up at night in the kitchen, and so you know, I think you always have this hope that he's gonna, you know, the next time he's gonna make it. And he, you know, he went to rehab several times, and, you know, almost completed the last one successfully. And he came home from the first time, and he said, you know, I was in there with a bunch of 50 and 60-year-old men, and he goes, I don't want to be that person. He goes, I want to get better. And so we always knew that this wasn't something he was choosing because he wanted to party, because I don't think he used it like that. I think he would use, and he'd go in his room and he'd sleep. So I never felt like he was doing it because that's what he wanted. I felt like that.
It becomes that way for sure. Yeah, I mean, originally, well, for somebody like me, like I just liked getting high. So but it was fun. It was. I wouldn't have kept doing it if it wasn't fun. But then there comes a point where it stops doing things for you and starts doing things to you. And it becomes survival at that point. I don't want to get sick. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't tell you how many times I sat in my car with a needle in my hand, loaded up, ready to go, going, I don't want to do this, you know?
Yeah.
But I had to. Otherwise, I couldn't get through my day.
Yeah.
So there definitely comes a point where it's no longer fun. It's no longer helping or working in the case of maybe for his medical. But now I need this to survive. So we were talking about tolerance. You know, my tolerance, so now I got to take double my medication. Now my medication ran out. I can't get my prescription for another 2 weeks, you know, so that's when I'm hitting the streets. And, you know, that's just as dangerous, you know, we know how dangerous that can be because we don't know what we're getting on the street.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, at that point, it's survival. It's not even about wanting to do it or needing it for whatever. It's just, I don't want to get sick anymore, you know, so... it's rough. It's a rough life.
Yeah, I think especially by the time you're like injecting drugs, like there's nothing party about it. Which is what
maybe the first few times, because it's like, oh my God, that was amazing. And then, you know, after a while of doing it, it's
it always brutal. Like the South Florida line for whatever reason, I never heard it until I moved down here, but like when people offer you drugs, like, which there are people who, like, it's crazy. Like, I'm like, y'all aren't very smart about your business, but like, I've had people roll up beside me.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't
Give
even
you the
think
roll
I
down the
have-
window sign.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
you party?
Yeah, that's the line.
Yep.
You party?
Huh.
Or at the
And
pull
I'm
up to a
like,
gas station, somebody's hanging out outside, or
Mhm.
walking out, you're walking in. Hey, you party?
Yep, that's the line. And I'm always like, well, I used to, but it was never really a party, you know, like, but it's not, because they're not selling like party drugs. They're selling like crack and heroin.
Yeah,
But
which is an isolation drug.
yeah, none of it. Yeah, it's not a party. But regardless, like, especially when it comes to like pain management, the things that they don't talk about, and doctors rarely tell you this, or certainly the ones that, in my experience, that like prescribe it don't tell you this, but you know, opiates aren't really good for managing pain long term. They cause pain. There's tons of research articles written about like opiate precipitated pain. There's like a long word for it. It's like opioid analgesic precipitated pain or something like that. But I mean, it eventually causes
Yeah, you feel
more pain.
you feel pain.
Yeah.
There's
yeah.
nothing causing your pain. They can
Yeah.
CT scan you or whatever, and there's nothing there, but you are feeling legitimate pain in your body, and it's the opioids.
Could it be psychosomatic? Maybe that you've been
it's
been in pain for so long. Or you think so?
But also like what's different between like somaticization, because like when you do like when there is like a somatic issue, it also is like it's not like it's fake, you know. So where the line is between like a somaticization disorder or like legitimate pain, I don't know if there is one, but it definitely, you know, like my pain, I got to a point with the TN where like it didn't matter how much I took, you know, like it wasn't helping the pain, and I was there was no in between for me. I was always like either writhing in pain, and I was also prescribed benzos and like literally like rocking back and forth in anxiety at the point like that I eventually had to do something about it. It was either that or just nodded out, passed out. Like there was no in between for me. And detox was a rough process. Pain was pretty agonizing. But once I got through it, things started getting a lot better, a lot more quickly. You know, like the pain makes me wonder, because like I did a lot of different treatments for the TN specifically. Like I went to like a laser therapy place that like specialized in TN, did a number of things, and all of them would tell me like, you're really not going to recognize the healing that is likely to take place until you get off of this stuff. And I mean, at the time when they tell me that, I'm like, y'all are crazy, you know? No. But you know, looking back, like it makes me wonder at what point was the pain there, and not to say that it wasn't real at any point, but what was causing what, you know? And that should be more like talked about and well known. Unfortunately, it's not, and people stay on pain meds for years and all their lives in some cases, and maybe some people need them, but you know, in my experience, like they really do tend to make things worse after a while.
Yeah.
And there's other ways to manage it too. Like, I mean, for whatever reason, like something like buprenorphine just doesn't have that same kind of effect. Seems to manage pain well without like that tolerance needing more kind of deal. I think buprenorphine or Suboxone, I mean, it's a miracle for a lot of people. I wish there was more education on those things for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So might be like personal, but like did some of those things like dealing with your son's struggles, and like kind of always having focus there, like how did that impact your other relationships? Did that like have an impact on you know, your marriage, your familial relationships, your employment? Like I imagine that had to be a strain on a lot of different things.
You I don't know about our marriage because we were pretty much, committed to taking care of Andy, and we were pretty
in it
like
together.
we were on the same page there, which I think is a blessing for us. That may not be the experience for a lot of families.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. You know what? I don't have very many friends. I have one or two that know about what we've been through, but I don't have a lot of friends, which is different because I used to have many more friends.
Was that due to everything you've been through?
Yeah, I don't know that it was other people, but as much as me. You just don't feel.
Yeah, you start to isolate yourself. Yeah,
totally don't just absolutely have no energy to go out and establish new friends. Now
it's a symptom of depression.
Yeah, I would say we were depressed. I mean, I know I had trouble sleeping a lot.
Yeah.
Things that shouldn't bother you at work or whatever do. So I really had to work at, my work mode, because I've always had people that have worked for me. So you can't just go in and turn your desk over and,
right.
and keep that job. So, yeah, you at least for me, I think you develop a split personality. So you have to compartmentalize what's going on in your personal life, and then do what you have to do on the outside.
Leave it at the door.
You do, and that comes at a cost, like you said, maybe of friendships, of normal. Support mechanisms or things that help you survive. So you're kind of you're limping along through your life. And
I imagine you don't even want to talk about this stuff,
No,
so you
not
avoid people so you don't have to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because then, now Andy's gone, so it's different. But when it was going on, everybody has advice. Well, you should do this, and maybe that's just human nature. They hear that you have a problem, they're going to offer advice. That's just what we do.
Yeah.
And with this kind of problem, there's not a lot of people that have that experience.
Yeah,
we do now, and we've met a couple people, even some friends of my wife that had something happen in the last couple of months similar. And now you have this connection to people that are going through this, and I think with the fentanyl that's going on and just killing people, I don't know who I was talking to in the last couple of days about this, but it's almost like the young people just vanish, right? So they took an Adderall or whatever it is, and it's becoming so common now that you just kind of just block it out. For me, the experience of Andy's death and how it happened, I was actually playing in a golf tournament that day. It was Martin Luther King Day, and Andy, we knew he was going from Orlando to his Daytona Beach hotel where he was going to stay for a while until their apartment was ready, and he was, he shared his location on his phone. So I remember being on the hole I was on, and I got a text and it said, "I've arrived at my location." And it was very happy because, we were talking to him a lot, FaceTime, and he was doing so good. And it was just the greatest high of possible. He's out, he's going back to Daytona. He's got a roommate that he's going to live with. They're both, going through this. And then, getting home, and I got home at 5:00, and Kim has the Ring doorbell at our house in Daytona.
Yeah.
So it's ding dong, somebody's at the door. So she pushes the button, and there's two, Daytona Beach, Ormond Beach policemen standing at our front door, and they just told us, and it was just, I couldn't believe it. But then, when we got up there and we talked to the police, and I'll just tell this to people that, they were so frustrated with the process. I mean, they told us, they said, "Look, we need to get in his phone. the only way we have of figuring out who did this and maybe stopping it is we have to go buy from the same, we got to get on Andy's phone. We got to pretend like we're Andy. We got to get a hold of whoever it was, get them to come and sell it to us again, test it in the lab to prove that it's the exact same thing that was in his body. And he said, we usually have 24 hours to do that. After that, he said, they're gone. And I said, well, how can we get in his phone? He said, well, that's Apple. You can't get in the phone. He said, as law enforcement, it's frustrating. He said, we have people that have child pornography on their phone, and Apple will not, they won't let us open the phone. That's
without
secure.
a warrant. Yeah.
And
or subpoena.
They said that, there are ways to do it. Not all the police departments have this software that'll let them. But I was just, sad to hear how, little tools they have. In Ormond Beach, he said they'd have 4 or 5 of these a week up there. There are known drug houses where somebody overdoses and they put them out in the yard and they call 911. The policeman that tried to help us, he lost his first cousin a year ago as a lady to an overdose. And so it's just, this fentanyl is out there, and it's just raging through the country. And I was surprised at the humanity of the police officers. They were sad that they couldn't, do more for Andy.
Right.
And
so how long from the time that you got the message that he had arrived to the Ring doorbell with the cop standing there, what was the time frame between those 2 moments?
2 or 3 hours.
Oh man.
And he was staying in a hotel. He and his buddy walked down a couple blocks, maybe half a mile, to this restaurant called Riptides on the beach, one of his favorite restaurants. And we learned from the police that they walked back, and he told his buddy, I'm going to stop. I'm going to go over here to this gas station. And we think that's when he got
that'd probably be my guess too. One of those do you party moments.
They had surveillance video of him walking all around the store. And he was inside walking up and down the aisles, went over to the cooler, grabbed a Gatorade, had it for a minute, put it back, and left the store and didn't buy anything. So
strange.
If it was hidden somewhere, we don't know. Maybe he had it with him, that he bought it in Orlando.
Right.
You just you don't know. But the police were, I felt very compassionate. They wanted to do everything they could for him, but
there's only so much.
Yeah.
So a little while ago, you mentioned some of the neighbors coming to the funeral, people that didn't know. Were you guys open about how it happened? What caused it? Was it it's I've had a lot of friends whose their families were pretty much it was a sudden death or cardiac arrest, and just were very understandably, but we're not open about what happened. I'm just curious about if you guys.
No, we never misled people. We were always, this is what happened.
Yeah.
We, didn't really want people to come to the funeral. It's hard to explain, but a lot of them pushed through and came anyway. So that was good.
Take your time.
Yeah. So one of the things that was interesting was Andy had several friends that we never knew that he'd made in Daytona, and they showed up. And they didn't know how bad it was, and they were really nice kids his age. A lot of them had substance abuse problems. They weren't executives, but they came to the funeral and shared that time with us. Part of it was because Alex reached out to him, because you go through this and you're never prepared. There's always I can tell you about how hard it is to to bury somebody, we had to borrow money to do it because it's not cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And they won't do the funeral until they have all the cash. Yeah. So, we at one point in time we thought about trying to get Andy to get life insurance. We never did, because you don't want to say, "Oh, we got to get life insurance because you're going to die." That's not how your mind works. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have, and he didn't have life insurance. So we had to come up with the money to bury him, and it's hard to find. What do you do next? Because as Alex said, we drove up there Monday night, and then the police said, well, call the medical examiner's office. Here's the number. They open at 9. So Tuesday morning, I get on the phone. I call them, and they're like, well, we have to do an autopsy. And we're like, well, can we see him? And they said, no, we don't have the facilities to do this. So they thought, well, maybe they'd get it done Tuesday. So I said, well, okay, we're sitting here. We're going to have to go find a funeral home. Well, so you Google the funeral homes, and we'd got in our car, and we just had to get out there and, kind of fumble around, and we ended up figuring it out. So we're going through all this stuff, and I called one of my brothers, and I told him, and I asked him to call my family. So, we didn't have to tell a lot of people. We had a couple people that we said, hey, look, this is what happened. We're trying to figure out the details, but, we don't really want anybody to come. And
so that was the first person that you told?
Well, I had to tell my boss because I had to leave town.
Right.
But then the person I really told about it was, my brother.
Yeah, so that was the first person you told as far as being like, hey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he knew Andy, and, he knew our troubles. The rest of my family really didn't know, but my brother Steve knew.
How did he react?
Like Alex did with Andy. He was very supportive. He was sad. So
it's tough, man.
It was tough.
How did the rest of your family react?
They all showed up, and at the funeral. And I would say this to people: if you know somebody that has this happen, I would expect them to push people away. It's not like it's coming, so it's hometown hero where it's a different kind of thing. You've lived for a long time trying to accomplish this, and all of a sudden you fail or it's over. The first thing you want to do is just totally, withdraw. You don't want to be around people. You want to be around your close family. But for us, the people that came that didn't listen to us, it really, really meant a lot. So I would say if you know of somebody that happens, even if you kind of know casually, and you have the means to go physically lay eyes on them, you don't have to say a lot, but physically being there is so powerful.
Yeah.
So powerful. So I would tell anybody, go to a service, if it's a graveside, whatever it is, and just be present. You may never see them again, but it means a whole lot. Mm-hmm. It means a whole lot.
I'm really glad that people showed up for you guys like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
And we didn't expect it, but it happened, so it was good.
Yeah.
Did that help with the healing process at all? Or the grieving process?
Yeah, some. I mean, what I did is, so I'd been to 2 of my friends or acquaintances' funerals in the last 3 or 4 years that had sons that died quickly. One of them had a heart attack, and one of them was in the service and died. So those funerals were big funerals. And so I went to them, and neither one of the dads said a word, And so you're you go to these things and you know, you're expecting to hear something, you know, tell us how you're feeling or what you're going through. And both of them sat and never said a word. And there was, you know, both of them, there was an anonymous pastor or a military chaplain who got up and, you know, pretty much said, you know, does anybody remember so-and-so? What do you remember? And these were both, you know, chaplains or whatever that didn't know the person that died, didn't know the family. That was just, they're just doing it. So what I did was I said, I'm not going to do that for this funeral. So I wrote out about a 3 or 4 page, you know, talk. I talked about Andy, and I did that. I got through it, and I'm glad I did, because, you know, I felt like, you know, people needed to know Andy, because I felt like, you know, his death was, you know, he didn't do it on purpose. I've learned listening to you guys, how your tolerance goes, down. So you might, you know, he got out and he went and did this. He shouldn't have done it, but he, you know, he probably just, for where he was at after just coming out of rehab, you know, just, it was too much for him.
Yeah.
So he wasn't trying to kill himself or anything like that. And I wanted to tell people that, you know, about him and in our life at his funeral, rather than just have them come to the funeral and, you know, have a, you know, some pastor they didn't know say some scripture or what have you. So that's what I did at the funeral. It was hard, but I'm really glad I did. So when you talk about the healing process, for me, it was, you know, finding things to do that you could try to, you know, compartmentalize your grief, but take some action and to do some things. And, you know, talking about that person who died that way, you know, I think a lot of families, you know, want to be anonymous. They don't want to share. I understand it.
I mean, it takes a little bit of bravery to do what you did. You know, it's some people may not have that in them.
A lot of strength.
Yeah, man. It's powerful.
Yeah.
But I imagine that a lot of people who like do the other thing and stay quiet, like, probably regret it, you know? I mean, I would if I was in that situation. Like, I would. I
think, you know, the thing now 6-7 months later is you hear people say this, but I have to do it, is you have to quit regretting anything, because there's absolutely nothing that can come of it. And that's, sounds like a cop-out maybe, but you truly have to say, you know, if there's things that, you know, we even did around the funeral that were like, man, I wish we wouldn't have done this. I wish we wouldn't have done that. You kind of have to just quit beating yourself up over it and say, you know what, you didn't do it maliciously. Might have been, you wish you would have done it differently, but don't regret it, because you really have to look to the future. You know, Andy,
I mean, in situations like that, I feel like you can only do the best that you can.
Yeah.
You know, I've never experienced that myself, you know, losing. I've never had like a close loss like that, but I can't imagine trying to get my thoughts together to put you just put the funeral together. You know? That has to be the most difficult thing to do.
Is that there was a several year period in Andy's life and in our life where we were very disconnected from a lot of things. It was just us, and yet we had a life. We did things, and I wanted to tell people about that, because, you know, a lot of people live out their life on Facebook, or, you know, even your family and friends. You know what so-and-so has been up to with their life. But we had this, I know, a big chapter where there was really nothing and people didn't know what we were up to. So I wanted to tell them about that. I mean, Andy started college, 8 different schools, you know, and, you know, I just think of myself. I mean, would I go back after flunking out the 4th time? But, you know, he kept somehow getting himself up.
Yeah.
And even when he went to his last rehab stint was right after Thanksgiving or right before Thanksgiving maybe. And you know, he told us, he said, "You can't do this for me. I got to do it." And I remember talking to Kim, and we're like, you know, we don't know that he's going to do it, but he got the strength to get in the Uber and get to the VA in Orlando. And so, you know, he had a lot of people, I think that people with addiction problems are just weak people. But the stuff I saw him go through, I'm like, you know, no, he's a very strong person. He had failures, but man, and even you guys, if you're recovering, I mean, that's not easy. That's some hard stuff.
Yeah.
The whole addiction into recovery, the whole thing is tough, man.
Yeah.
Because we know what we're doing when we're in addiction. We know how bad it is, and we know, like I was saying before, it becomes survival.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of our pain in active addiction comes from the fact that we know.
Yeah.
You know, and we feel like we're just a piece of shit. And then taking that step, there's a lot of fear. I mean, I don't know about you, Austin, but for me, I was terrified to go to treatment.
Oh, that was the only thing keeping me from it.
Yeah,
years.
right. I was scared, man. Like, you know, and then I remember walking in there and they tell me only 10% of people that go to treatment make it. I'm like, well, thanks for the hope.
Yeah.
You know, and you walk into this facility and I remember pulling up to the facility and stepping out of the car, and it was like I was in a zoo or something. All the other patients are all, you know, doing one of these, looking, and you know, I'm dope sick at the time, and you know, I fear dope sickness because it's the worst feeling in the world. And you know, I don't know what to expect. I don't know if I'm gonna make it. I don't know how they're gonna treat me here. I knew nothing. You know, so it's hard to take that step. It definitely takes some strength for sure.
Being my age and living my life, I don't think I've been through anything nearly as hard as what Andy went through.
Yeah.
And he had the strength to get up and do it. That's, if anything I've learned through this whole experience, is the people who that is part of their life, how strong they must be to get up and keep fighting, because I don't think people who have ever not been in that can truly appreciate how hard that is. You might look at them and say, well, they don't have a lot of material things or degrees hanging on the wall or what have you, so therefore they've had it easy. It's not about that. It's about your intestinal fortitude and your personal commitment and hard work to, it's Olympic level, somebody that's committed their whole lives, and it takes everything about you to move ahead and to beat it.
Yeah, and it's a game that doesn't end either. If you got to continue to grow.
Well, it's resilience. I mean, it sounds like Andy had a lot of resilience and like never quit on that resilience, and whether like it ends up as, somebody finding recovery, or, that's really like, as an agency, what Rebel attempts to capitalize on is the resilience of an individual struggling with substance use disorder. I mean, so many of the people that we work with, like on the syringe exchange, that are like currently experiencing homelessness, and like you said, like a lot of people on the outside who don't have those experiences may view them as weak or whatever they view them as, but to get up each day and I mean, they make decisions to like go to a syringe exchange and make sure they have clean supplies, or get their ID and take steps while they're still having this massive struggle that so many people can't fathom.
Right.
I mean, that's huge, and to be able to recognize that and kind of rest on the fact that he was so resilient for so long, it's a win.
Yeah. And for our family, just that, knowing that about his personality gives us, comfort, and also, it helps us learn to live our life, because, I always thought it was kind of shallow for people to say, well, what would so-and-so want us to do? He wouldn't want us to be this way or that way. I mean, it's real, you know, when somebody like that, you lose somebody like that, you really begin to, you know, peel back the layers of the onion and see what they were as a person in their life when you lose to somebody like to this.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we spoke with Alex, we, you know, he shared a little bit about like what he's done and how he's been able to deal with some of the grief. Like you mentioned, you know, connecting with your family and leaning on those supports that you have. Like, what have you done? How have you managed to like continue to, you know, keep going through all of this?
Well, a couple things. Well, number one, you really have to be intentional about, you know, getting better and moving ahead with your life. So I have spent a lot more time, you know, getting in shape, more exercise, eating better. I mean, truly, your body, you have to pay attention and think about intentionally making your body stronger, because you have to. You don't need that extra burden of being, you know, physically deficient while you're trying to get better. I'm, you know, a Christian. I've gotten much closer back with God.
Which is awesome. Most people walk away.
Yeah.
In cases
I did
like
for
this.
a long time. You know, and you know, I've really spent a lot of time in that, and it's been very good. I've had things happen that I know it's God.
Mm-hmm.
I remember there's been other things, but this one is the biggest bell ringer for me. We were at the house. We were getting stuff together for the funeral, and we had to have this DD 214. We had to have some form that proved that he was discharged from the Army in order for him to have a military funeral.
Right.
And we had a crate of paperwork and these binders in it, and they didn't have tabs and labels. And we're just sitting there in the living room, and we got to come up with this form, and we have to do it quickly, and otherwise the Army wouldn't send people and do that kind of stuff. And we wanted to have that form. And I just remember thinking, I don't think I said it out loud. Maybe I did. You know, God or Andy, you're going to have to help us. So we took these binders and we split them up amongst those of us who were there. And somebody, I don't know who it was, it might have been me, opened this binder. It was literally this thick to that form. And it's a 1-page document that wasn't labeled. And I got goosebumps. And I've had other things for me that have happened in the last 6 months where, you know, there's a God, and I don't know, you know, I've had dreams about Andy, and you know, I think there's another life and a supreme being, and for me, he's become much more real. I think, you know, there have been times when I'm really sad, and I can just feel God, like, you know, like breathing air into me, and I feel better. The other thing I've done, I don't know if everybody should do this, but I have chosen to, at work, I have a job where I have, you know, a lot of people that work for me and things. I don't talk about it with them. That's like my zone of, hey, I'm going to have a normal relationship with you. Because when it first happened, you want to talk about it. And I got the feeling quickly that for most people, they just, you know,
too heavy.
How you doing today, Dave? Good? Or if you say, man, you know, I had a dream about Andy last night, they're like, ooh.
Yeah.
And for me, that has been a something that's helped me to have those areas in my life where I say, you know what, this is out of bounds for me to talk about what I'm really dealing with inside, even though there's a whole lot going on and there's a whole lot of growth. And that has been kind of therapeutic, because when I'm at work, when I'm doing stuff with work, I don't talk about it. And as a result, it kind of helps you maintain, you know, not so sad. There's times when, you are in that place, but you all of a sudden are just overwhelmed and sad. And for me, what I do is I will get up and change my surroundings. So if I'm in a meeting or I'm someplace and you just get something washed over you like a wave in the ocean, I change my surrounding. I'll walk away. I'll do something different, and it helps to change gears and get a different view of the room. It helps you not from hitting that
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely understand that.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I have a friend who recently lost her sister. I actually don't know how, but I know that she did lose her sister. And one of the things that she told me not long after was like that she was finding it helpful that, some people in her life knew and other people in her life just had no idea. And so like she could kind of have like some normalcy in like interactions, and people weren't, either tiptoeing around or being, like, are you doing okay? Like she still had like kind of an anchor to get away from that for a little while, but also like not totally avoid it. Like she still had that other side too. Yeah. I hadn't really thought about that before, but I can see how that would be helpful.
I'm fortunate enough that I have a job that I go to and I'm around people like that. So I think you have to have that luxury, if you will, to where you have this other kind of part of your life where you can afford to not, be too open about what's going on in your life. So that
it's not always on your mind. It's not always in your face. You're not always forced to talk about it all the time. Give your mind a little bit of a break. It seems.
Yeah, and I think that's good for about everybody to have people in your present circumstances that don't know all about your baggage and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? It's not like you're hiding it, but sometimes it's healthy, I think, to be around people that know you for who you are. They don't know who you for what you were.
That goes to changing your environment too. You have your support system, your family, and you talk with them about it, and then you go over here and okay, here I don't need to dwell on this. I don't need to talk about it. I have nothing to figure out. So that's a kind of a way of changing we'll call it your mental environment. You know?
I one time in my career I lost a job. I got fired, and I had to get back up because I had kids and get another job, and I was shocked when I went for job interviews that my prospective employers didn't care that I got fired. Because I remember thinking, they're going to want to know, and they're not going to want to hire me. I'm damaged goods. But they saw me for who I was, and they were excited that I could start right away.
Yeah.
And about 6 months ago, one of my coworkers, his wife got fired. They actually both worked for the same company I work for, and he was just devastated. And I said, tell her she will be blown away in her first job interview that they won't be fixated on, well, what happened? What'd you do?
Yeah.
Did you steal something or what'd you do? Most people don't care, what you have been through or what mistakes you've made in your life. A few years ago, you guys are probably the same way. When you meet somebody new, you don't really care about all the baggage they have. You just take them for
who they are
today and their conversations today.
I mean, as an addict, I understand that completely. Because I used to be that guy, and and then today that's not how people see me anymore.
No, they don't. But you see yourself that way, so I think you have to be courageous enough to leave that baggage that is there. Say, hey, what? I don't need to share this, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, is there anything you want to add? Is there anything you want to share about Andy? We have, I don't know if it's in the shot. Is it in the shot? We have a picture of your beautiful family here, and Andy and his.
Well, I'm gonna have them send me some photos. So throughout this interview,
that'd be groovy.
There'll be some. We'll put some stuff up to honor him.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. No, Andy was. I've talked a lot about him, and this has been great. I never thought I'd be ever doing something like this. You know, you have something that you go through that you know can help somebody someday, and you know, you never know when you're just going to come across somebody that your experience can help a little bit. So hopefully it helps people. It helps me being here, meeting you guys. I'm fascinated by Rebel and what you're doing. I've watched a couple of your videos, and you know, bravo to you guys being
thank you,
courageous enough to get out there and
no. I mean, we commend your courage to come out here and shed tears in front of everyone and talk about it. You know, that's this has been a heavy one, but very, very good, very informative, and you've also dropped a lot of knowledge on how to get through something like this. And you know, if somebody out there is watching this and maybe they're going through the same thing, and they see you and hear you, you're definitely a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, your hope that things could get better and you can move forward. And
yeah, I think it's going to has the potential to be helpful to a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. I mean, there's, you know, parents who have similar experiences. There's parents who could potentially have this experience, and, you know, fear the day similar to like you guys were. And then there's people who are going through what Andy went through, kind of in between. And there's a lot of people, I know that there's people who, you know, watch our series that work with people on both sides of it, you know, work with grieving parents, are grieving parents, and work with people, children of, you know, potentially grieving parents. So no, I really appreciate you coming on here, and you and Alex kind of being willing to talk about it. I hope in some way it was cathartic or therapeutic for you guys.
100%.
Yeah. Awesome, man.
Made some new friends. And
absolutely,
that's
man.
what the future holds.
Absolutely. For sure.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
You're
thank
welcome.
you.
Thanks,
David.
guys.